It's a pleasure to be with this group. I love working in pricing. In fact, I've been in pricing and optimization for more than 20 years in a number of different industries, applying technology and consulting practice to help make a difference for B2B. And I just want to call out that recessions are nothing new. All right. So there may be different causes. There may be different depths of recessions, and they may come for different reasons, but they're just a fact of life and economy. And it's been my privilege, I suppose you'd call it, to live through three major economic recessions in the U.S. Over the length of my career. But I've also been close to industry-specific cycles where there may be some economic things going on that are even running opposite to what's going on in the general economy. So I just want to say, these come and go. They're not the end of the world. So hang on to your hat. We're going to get into what we can do and where we can find some opportunity, even in the midst. So let's take a look first. What, in fact, do we know about the likelihood of a recession ahead? Here are four headlines that have been captured in a 24-hour period. And guess what? They're all telling very different stories. There's a widely varying outlook. Some analysts are saying the recession is going to happen for sure. Some are saying it's not likely. And some are saying it's really dependent on if something happens, if one government does this or somebody tweets that, cough, cough. So what we do know is there has recently been a downgrade in growth forecasts around the world. Let's take a look here in the U.S. We see that for 5 of the past 6 years, to the left of this red line, we've enjoyed really a tremendous period of growth. 5 of those years have been above 2% growth year on year, and some even pushing 3%. But what's the forecast for the coming 5 years? Growth is at or below 2% for all of those years. So hold that thought. It's going to be a different environment than the one that we've been used to for quite a while. And what about Europe? Similar kind of forecast here. Yes, there is a growth predicted, but that growth prediction has been cut from prior years. So it looks like Europe may do a little bit better in 20 than it did in 2019, in 2020, than in 2019, but even down from 2018. So this may be the nature of the downturn, perhaps less of a truly negative growth event and more of a lessened growth or even anemic growth, depending on how it hits your particular industry. So those are high-level numbers. And those are fine for what they are, GDPs and what's happening in the aggregate economy, but every company is different. So I'm going to ask for your audience participation right up front here. I'd like to ask you to do me a favor and take a quick poll. Down at the bottom of your screen toward the right-hand side, you'll see the word polls right there. If you click on that, it's going to pop up a poll question. And it's one question trying to understand what is your anticipated or forecasted 2020 outlook. Are you expecting growth, strong growth, or maybe just moderate growth? Do you expect to be flat or perhaps slight decline or major decline? If you would please go ahead and take a second and click on that. In 2 or 3 slides, I'll get those results from Megan and we'll let it inform what we talk about. Now let's be honest about these last 4 or 5 years. Growth has been strong, and when I talk to folks in your shoes, here's what I hear. The growth is so strong that, quite honestly, orders are up, revenues are up, ASPs are likely to be up, margins are up in many or all cases. And, you know, it might be tempting to believe that with all that goodness, there can't possibly be anything amiss down inside my prices or down inside my pricing practices, right? I mean, if the results are this good, doesn't that speak for itself? It's kind of ironic that if you've tried to get budget for projects you wanted to do in the pricing department, you may have actually had your executives play this back to you. You know, things look so good. I don't even know that there's a problem there. Why do we want to spend money and invest in pricing tools or growing the pricing team? But you know what? Seasoned pricers know that it's very possible to have significant leakage and problems down inside your business that gets covered up when volumes are up and demand is up and the market is sort of giving you a lift, right? So for instance, you could be adding new customers at a record rate, and that's wonderful. So the fact that you happen to be pricing those customers through a stale matrix that's got a net price in there from 2015 and it hasn't been updated in several years, even though your costs have gone up, well, maybe that gets a little hidden because margin dollars, profit dollars are actually growing due to the volume effect. So you still look good. Same thing could be true for margin rates. The margin rate on this item that I'm talking about, the one with the stale price in the matrix, its particular margin rate might be shrinking. You'd say, well, that's bad. Doesn't that show up? Well, not if those customers that you were adding are maybe coming from industries that you're breaking into where the product mix is more favorable toward higher margin items. So overall, your margin rate could even be growing, even though you're losing here, there, and the other place where you really shouldn't be because you've overlooked something or you've made some pricing mistakes or you lack the ability to get in and be precise. So both revenues, margins, profit dollars, they can all look good in the aggregate because of the rising tide effect, but that doesn't mean that you don't have something amiss down underneath. And here's what happens in the recession. Here's what happens in the environment where you're not growing. A new kind of scrutiny happens, and these things get looked at, trust me. So how are you going to improve financial performance when the market's not helping you anymore, like they have been? When the tide's not rising, what will you do when the ASPs go flat in this picture? Or they go down or the quantities decline? That's what we need to be thinking about. You could have problems like over general pricing where you're not being granular enough. You could have excessive or unwarranted overrides and deviations. You could be responding poorly to cost volatility over the past several years, and maybe no one knows about it but you. It's going to show up. You need to get ready because, look, if you sell enough stuff, right, it'll cover it up. It's like what happens when they create an artificial lake for a hydroelectric project. They build a dam and the water moves up, and once the water reaches its normal level, nobody can see those old houses and trees and trash and cars that are living at the bottom of the lake. We forget all about that. We just go water skiing on top of the lake, take our family out for a picnic. What happens when the drought comes and the water levels drop? Yeah, then the ugly stuff really shows up. And so that's what we have to be ready for in a potentially recessionary environment. Now, for many years, we've been analyzing B2B transaction data sets to detect and quantify exactly how much of this junk is hiding at the bottom of a business's lake, so to speak. And we've published a benchmark report recently on these findings, and here's what we learned. We learned that even through the boom times that most industries have been enjoying for the past 5, 6, 7, 8 years, when you go in with a set of specific tools that are able to dig beneath the covers and look at price quality in a more detailed and granular fashion, what we found is that due to things like suboptimal pricing practices and very inefficient things that go on and result in lost productivity, what are we talking about? Things like wide price variances, excessive overrides, not responding to cost changes very well, inefficient manual processes for doing routine things in pricing, slow quote times, groove pricing. Any and all of these pricing problems, they drain a significant amount of profit from an average B2B business every year. How much? If you add these two together, the blue and the yellow bar you see here on the right, we're talking about a figure, a profit dollar figure that's bigger than 6% of annual sales. That's the average number. That's the median number. Greater than 6% of average sales, a figure like that in lost profit dollars every year. That's lurking under the surface of the water. Maybe people don't see it yet. It could rear its ugly head. And by the way, these are things that you can't see when you're looking at a P&L statement. A P&L statement is way too aggregated. It's a blunt instrument. It doesn't show these things. Why? Because the P&L gets tricked by the increased volumes. Volumes are up, profit dollars are up, ASPs are up, so it just seems like everything's going well. But if you look under the covers, you may see it's not so. In fact, recessionary periods, it's kind of a double whammy. Not only may they expose problems that are actually have been tolerated to this point in the business, but if you don't respond properly in the recessionary environment, it can actually worsen the problem. Those very same phenomena that we mentioned can go from bad to worse, and then you're really in a pickle. So That's what we're going to talk about today. Let's do a little level set here, a little sanity check, and set some expectations. First, look, I recognize there are realities and limitations in life, right? You as a pricing professional, you have a designated role in your organization. You have a span of responsibility and influence. You have a certain set of things you're accountable for. So I'm not going to offer any blue sky ideas that are just impossible for you to implement. But you know what? You have more power than you may think you have. And what I am going to ask is that you be open to looking at areas that you might not have looked at before, and considering some things you might not be doing right now, or doing some things in a different way, because that's what's going to be required. I think it's fair to say, and I want you to be in the mindset of, let's assume that steady year-on-year price increases of the same magnitude that you've been doing for the past several years are off the table, not available to you. So you're going to need a different play. If your pricing program has been built around across-the-board price increases and trimming the tail and the distributions and a few other simplified approaches, those aren't going to work anymore. You need something else to make a difference, and we'll talk about that. A big idea that I'm going to speak to in several ways today is agility. You need to be agile. Let me just do the headline on that. If you're not able to update your prices more frequently and in a more granular and targeted way and more accurately, you're likely to get stung. All right? So before we go to the next slide, Megan, have we had some responses to the survey? And can you tell me what % of the survey respondents are looking for strong growth in 2020?
Great. So we did have a strong amount of respondents. The majority responded that their forecast is significantly down or flat for 2020. That's
okay. Well, we're talking to the right people, and we've got the right topic. Then this is consistent with what we're seeing.
That's over 50% of your poll respondents.
Yeah. That's great, and I think the ideas that we're going to share here they're going to be very applicable, and they're going to align with the forecast that you're thinking about. So, first idea: does anyone remember this Super Bowl, this recent Super Bowl? Now, I'm from Atlanta, and so I know this game all too well, right? Here we were near the end of the third quarter, and Atlanta is ahead by the Patriots, 28-3. So what needs to happen for them to win this game? They do not need to score anymore. Adding points is not the path to victory here. They only need to prevent New England from scoring any points, and they are the winner. Can you see that shift in mindset for a minute? In case you didn't see this game, however, something tragic happened, and Atlanta absolutely collapsed. They did, and New England came back and gave them a shellacking right there at the end. Now, there are some really deep lessons, that can be pulled out of this story, and I'm sure will be for years, but here's the bottom line. When the game changes, your mindset, your strategy, your playbook, what it means to win, the definition of winning and how you get there, that needs to change too. Because if you keep running the old plays, then that great advantage that you built up in the prior periods, you're likely to give it away and end up as the big loser. And so we can apply that same idea to pricing. Let's do that. What does it mean to succeed with price in a recessionary environment? Have you thought about it? Listen, it may not mean increasing ASPs year on year anymore, or increasing them as much as you have in the past, because when the market pressure is high, hey, simply holding the price constant year on year could well be victory. Or if things are really tough, it might be the case that if you take a lesser price decrease than all of the competitors in your space, then you're actually the big winner. Yeah, I gave up some price, boss, but I didn't give up nearly as much as everybody else in the space. Then you are a winner. Similar on margin. You may have been growing profits year on year, and that's been great, and you've been a hero for that. I understand it. But in the down times, it It's likely to be the case that you're not growing the profits, but you are preventing erosion of the profits you already have and the margin rates you already enjoy. So my first recommendation to you is that you begin now to reset your own mental model on what it means to succeed in pricing and how you measure the success of pricing. Get a new yardstick. And listen, it's going to have to go beyond you. You're going to have to, if you will, educate stakeholders around you outside the pricing department. They need to understand that mind shift as well, because if they use last year's yardstick to judge your performance in the future, and you may have taught them that yardstick, right? You probably took some credit for the fact that you picked up 100 basis points year on year. Wow, we're great. But if that is how they judge you in the recessionary period, it's going to look really ugly. So here's a tip. If your organization conducts annual planning exercise, as many do this time of year, and you're in a place where you're implicitly or explicitly committing price performance for the coming year, some goals around pricing and price metrics, get ahead of this and make sure that those goals that you're signing up for align to the forecast survey results that you just shared with me a minute ago. If you're expecting a decline, a drop in growth, or a true net negative decline, you need to be thinking about defining success as holding on to what you've already got or giving up less than the other guy in your space. So go get those numbers into the plan so you get measured against that. Does that make sense? All right. Now, here's another idea. Let's come at this from a different angle. If you're a Floridian, let's say, or a Georgian like myself, you live in a warm, balmy environment, and you're planning to take an ice fishing trip up north, well, I think we're all smart enough to realize, hey, that's a new environment for me. I haven't been ice fishing before, and I'm not likely to pack my normal warm weather gear and clothing and expect to survive there, right? I'm not going to wait, by the way, I'm not going to wait till I get up into a foot of snow before I start trying to figure out, well, how am I going to survive? Ahead of the trip, I need to be answering questions like, how am I going to stay warm? What shelter will I need? And what sort of clothing is going to prevent the frostbite? So where do you learn all these things? If you're a warm climate person and you're going to go into an environment you've never been in before, you ask people who live there all the time. The natives, so to speak, they're the experts. They know how to get along. And we can borrow great ideas from people who live in environments that we don't routinely hang out in, but where we might be headed. By the way, this is more than just an academic example. I actually lived this one out. A couple of years back, I went up to the Great North and during the time of the polar vortex, and guess what? I took a lesson from the people who live here all the time. I followed their model. I adopted their practices, and not only did I survive, but I actually thrived. That's me there on the left, wearing the white anorak, and set a personal record for sleeping out on a frozen lake in minus 34 degrees Fahrenheit. So, hey, all of you who are getting snow dumped on you today, I feel you. I feel you. So, all right, back on point. Let's talk about how we apply this idea of lifting ideas from another environment that is like the place we're going to, even if it's not our normal climate. I've spent time with several lighting manufacturers in the past several years, and there's an interesting story in this industry if you don't already know it. And I've lifted many of the ideas that I'm going to share with you later in this presentation from things I've learned in this industry. The big event in lighting is that effectively they're sunsetting their old lamp technologies, incandescent, fluorescent, even halogen. There's a massive switchover to LED. And this revolution has happened very rapidly in the past 10 years. The whole technology space is flipping. All the lighting manufacturers are doing it. And so here's what that's meant for them. Because LEDs don't function the way some of the other light technologies do in an economic sense. So the old technologies, they had typical year-on-year inflationary price dynamics, which I think are similar to what many of you enjoy in your industry. But LEDs, oh man, completely different. What happens is there is a steep downward trajectory on price from the day that product is introduced. So these manufacturers are selling at lower prices than they've ever seen before. And they have these product life cycle curves. Well, firstly, they're innovating and cannibalizing their own products about every 18 months. Because if they don't do it, the competitors will. So that's number one. They're coming out with new products that have technological advances and make their old products obsolete. And that new product gets introduced. Maybe it's got a sweet price point on it, making good margins just like they used to in prior decades. But you know what happens over 2 to 3 quarters? A very short life cycle? That price is dropping by 30 to 50%. Ooh, think about that. I mean, I think many of you would say that would be a pretty scary pricing environment to live in. If you had to drop your prices by 20, 30, or 50% across a period of 6 to 9 months, right? Do you think you could learn something about how to thrive from someone who lives in that environment all the time and maybe lift some of their plays into your world? I think we can, and that's what we're going to do here. These pricing dynamics, in fact, I've said lighting. Another one to look at is semiconductors and high tech. They have the same constant downward pricing trajectory. Semiconductors has had this for decades. Unit price starts high, and it drops every month, till 70% of the price or initial price is eroded, and then the product is obsolete, and they start the process all over again. So we're going to borrow from those folks, and that really becomes the basis for better than a crystal ball. I want to share about a half dozen ideas that come out of these industries where downward price trajectory is the norm, and let's see what we can learn. Okay, to my distributors on the call, I feel for you. Life can be complicated when you have 300,000 SKUs, a gigantic price matrix that's comprised of, countless pricing condition records stuffed away in your ERP. You may have thousands of customer agreements spread out across the sales team's laptops if you're really unfortunate, or maybe locked away in the ERP somewhere. It's tough for you to update. So in the past, could well be the case that you've just resigned yourself to annual price update activity because you couldn't bear the pain of finding and changing all those prices any more frequently. But back to agility, the annual price update isn't going to cut it anymore. Not when your purchase volumes are declining, not when there's downward price pressure in the market. Because if it rolls around to June and you're still sitting on your January 1 price that aligned with the market but doesn't match anymore, you're going to be driving away good business. That sitting on a price for 12 months isn't going to cut it when you have an overstock situation and you need to push a promotion and management comes to you and says, I need to get that inventory moved out before the end of quarter. What can you do? You can't be sitting on a stale price. So you need to make more frequent price changes to stay in step with the market. In fact, you might say, how frequently? It's going to vary by industry. It's going to vary by business. But I have seen businesses that started with annual price updates 5, 6 years ago, and they're at a place, the market has changed, and they've gotten onto this reality where they're changing their prices once or twice a quarter. Ooh, let that sink in for a minute. Now, for people who don't live in your shoes every day, hey, you know what they think? Well, updating a price list, that seems pretty simple, right? You start with some kind of a trigger. Maybe you have a cost change, or you have a discount program or some volume target you're trying to hit. And it's real easy. You figure out what price you need to charge. You go check with your executives or other stakeholders in the business. You tell them how much you're planning to change price, what the impact will be, and you get their buy-in. Yeah, it's simple, right? And then you just sit back and wait, and those customers down there on the bottom right, they're going to show up and take a lot of product off our hands at the new price, and all is well, right? Well, hang on a minute, right? What planet are they living on? Look, you might be saying to me, there is no way I can update my prices once or twice a quarter. And you want to know why? Because the real process to update my price list is a total spaghetti mess. It looks like what you see here. There are so many moving parts, so many spreadsheets flying around in email, so many stakeholders playing a role, back and forth handshakes. I mean, geez, it takes us 2 months to execute the process once. There's no way we can do it more frequently without going crazy or killing each other. Hey, and that's just the left side of the picture we're talking about. On the right-hand side, when you push those changes into the market, what does that do? That triggers a huge snowstorm of customer exception price requests that flows back through sales, it flows back through pricing, bogs us all down, and in the end, we end up giving away half of the price changes we were trying to get in the first place. Just horrible. So I get it. You're sitting there saying, Barrett, I'm drowning here and you're throwing me a brick. Thanks so much. Look, I understand, but what's the alternative? listen, if you only allow yourself to update your prices once a year, let's say for a moment that you anticipate that you will need to take prices down by 2% this year to remain competitive with the market, and but you only have a once a year window to make that price change. Let's say it's at the beginning of the year. Then your only option is to over-respond and take that full 2% drop right at the beginning of the year. And you see that as the dark orange line here sitting on the -2. Just go in January, whenever you make your change, take the -2%, which you think is the right number on average for the coming 12 months, and just set that. But, and by the way, that's what I think a lot of businesses do. I've seen that over and over. I hear that. If you can be agile, if you could change prices every month and make smaller moves throughout the year, taking decreases only when you need to and only by the amount you need to at that moment in time, that would be represented by the top line here. This is a major price play in industries where price decrease is the norm. They're very agile about how often and how much they make these price changes. So what's the impact of being agile? Well, you guessed it. If you are agile versus doing the one and done price move, then you get to keep all of these incremental profits that you're otherwise going to sacrifice when you take that full price cut all at once. And remember, in a recession, success means keeping the profits you already have. So this is a major way to do that. Don't go in and do an all at once for a long time price cut. You want to go in and do very surgical and precise price cuts. And you know what? That would be a crazy idea for me to suggest that you would actually update your prices more frequently if I'm also telling you to continue to do it the old-fashioned way, according to the ugly spaghetti picture back there. But listen, the tools are out there to streamline this process, to automate those tedious manual tasks, to use data and AI models to inform your prices and predict the impacts with greater accuracy. You have more high-quality tools available to you as a pricer than at any time in the history of B2B. You should be actively pursuing these kinds of technologies to give you the agility you need to respond in the recessionary times. And you'll get some important side benefits. You know, you're going to elevate the roles of several people in this process. You're going to get them out of data munging and get them into making value-added decisions. You're going to find that you have greater collaboration across departments about what prices you want to put into the market in the first place. So a lot of virtuous things happen if you will go for some technology enablement. Don't just live with this picture. Change this picture. It's possible. Let me pivot for a moment. I want to talk about the price modes and price methods that we commonly find in B2B, and then we're going to understand how we might make improvements around this framework. So B2B companies typically have multiple price modes at work, responding to the various customer needs that they have. For example, the well-known list price sits out there. Maybe nobody buys anything at this value. It may just be a placeholder. It might actually be your e-commerce price. I don't know. Sometimes people will pay at this price, various situations, but it's more common that we will see there is some kind of price differentiation happening in what I like to call a price matrix or price schedules that are different than the list price, where you're talking about broad groups of customers or broad geographies or broad industries, and you're saying, I'm going to go ahead and set what I believe are more market-aligned prices for these customer groups. Here you see small, medium, large customers broken out and cash customers that we don't even have a credit account for. Maybe something like that. There could be quantity breaks going on in here as well. That's pretty common. But these are non-negotiated price types that you set into the market, and it's sort of take it or leave it for your customers. And a portion of your business likely flows this way and is priced this way. But, you know, that's not enough to get the whole job done. What are the other two common price modes? Negotiated price modes in one of two forms. One is what I'll call the annual price agreement or contract, sort of customer specific. Usually you go in and pick a set of items that they buy frequently and give them some favored pricing on those items. And those prices are good, you know, for a year or until 2099, if that's the expiration date that you stuck on the end of that agreement. Yeah, I've seen that. And then the other one is then order overrides. So even when and if someone's on the matrix or they have an agreement, they may just call you up and say, yeah, but this order is different. It's a big quantity. It's a special customer. It's a new market we're trying to penetrate, whatever. I need a special price. So more likely than not, in this picture, individual customers are purchasing through more than one mode at a time. And so you know what? There's a lot of good we can do in correcting the prices and the conditions under which people are allowed to push certain kinds of business through these certain price modes and types. Let's explore that a little bit. Here's what happens when you don't do it. When you don't think about these things together and you don't manage them together, the market will figure out, your customers will figure out how to exploit you. They know how to work your system. And so what they'll do is they'll wiggle around in the price modes to find the absolute cheapest way to buy whatever it is that you're selling. And you'll see that, for example, look at this picture on the left, where the size of the dot, the size of the bubble is the volume that a customer brings. And if it's your convention that small customers should be priced like small customers, and maybe that's the highest price in your business, and large volume customers should be priced consistently, and likely that would be the lower prices because you're rewarding them for the volume. It's pretty common. You know what these customers do when they find the holes in your program? You end up with situations like a small customer, a tiny guy, manages to get an agreement for the year. He gets you to commit prices for the year, and he doesn't commit any volume to you, and they're sweetheart prices at that. And when you go and do the analysis, it looks like he's paying a lower price than your big customers, the ones that you said you wanted to reward with the most favored pricing. These inversions happen all the time. So what do you do about it? What's the remedy? You think of these things holistically. Maybe you create some fences that say small customers don't deserve a special price agreement. So if you have one and you don't deserve it, I'm going to retire it. I'm going to retire your agreement, and you're going to go back to getting the standard price on the matrix as you deserve. Or maybe what you do is you think about the price points between that matrix. Let's say the matrix is giving a 10% discount, but when somebody calls and asks for an override on an order, your average discount is 60%. Whoa, wait a minute. You know what you've just done there? You've created a huge incentive for the market to ask you for an override on every order, even if the conditions don't warrant it, because it's really not much effort for them to ask, and it could result in a huge payday for them, right? A huge savings. So if maybe you need to take a look at that and say, I don't know if I've got those two prices set or those two discount levels calibrated relative to each other, and I'm creating a big incentive for people to abuse my system and come in with a bunch of order exception prices that they really don't need, don't deserve, and but I did it to myself. So you could also put a fence here where small orders are not eligible for an order override. You know, maybe you don't have a threshold today, or you have it, but you're not enforcing it. Those are the kinds of plays that you can think about to get the demand flowing back in the price mode that you need to have it flowing in. This is a little different than just going in and raising the prices in all of the price types. We're talking about getting the business priced by the right price type. You see what I'm saying? Let me dig in a little bit more to the matrix mode, because there are a couple of opportunities here that usually are happening in B2B. I see this quite often. A matrix was initially created. There was likely a clear design intent to have some column pricing that varied by some natural dimension. Like, look at the x-axis here. What is the dimension? What is the way we're kind of segmenting customers in this price matrix? Well, we're using customer size. And the idea might have been that small customers should belong to the left-hand side of the matrix and get a high price, and large customers over on the right-hand side will get a relatively lower price. But over the years, the lines can become blurred, and there may have been some abuse of the system. Maybe the sales rep had a way of appealing to sales ops or some other function in the business and begging to get their customer reassigned to a more attractive part of the matrix, i.e. a lower price tier, but one they didn't really qualify for. I don't have a hard time spotting this. I can stand up some pretty simple analytics and reveal that there is often a significant over-concentration of revenue flowing through just a few cells in the matrix, and that's the giveaway. So in such a case, it's time to overhaul that matrix, to get back to first principles, to clean up those customer assignments. Now, technically, I would say this is not a price increase within the matrix in the classic sense. I'm not saying here go in and raise the price in one of those cells from $2.10 to $2.50. I'm saying realize that that customer doesn't belong in that level of the matrix. Move them to where they belong. Now, when that happens, they may see an effective price change, but it's different. I think the market receives it differently. It's different in your practice. It's more of a course correction that puts customers back to the prices they were qualified for in the first place. So this is one of those margin leakage areas that is easily covered up when you have strong growth, but it may be exposed in the lean times. And by the way, while you're at it, while you're in there working on the matrix, you may decide to restructure that matrix itself. On the bottom here, look at the dimensions we're talking about now. Maybe you want to add some more dimensions and get more granular. Keep customer spend, add customer type, add a geography dimension in there so you can set specific prices more accurately to various parts of your market that you were formerly serving with just a single price. I think you get the idea. More granular pricing and better segmentation is another kind of agility. And you need that agility so that you can discount only if and where you must. All right, manufacturers, let me talk about something that I know is a unique concern that you have, and it may keep you up at night. You have large fixed costs, huge capital investments in your plants and equipment. And you might have even been ramping up production over the past decade because of that growth you've been enjoying. But next year, what happens if you lose 5% of your demand? Wow. If you fail to hit critical volume thresholds, then your whole economic model for the entire business gets squeezed, because the cost per unit effectively goes down when your production scale goes up. And that's a highly leveraged proposition for you, given your capital positions. And so your margins are going to sink, right? And people get nervous. They start saying, oh, we might have to lay off the third shift because our order book is starting to sag. And so I understand you care about profits and margins just like every other pricing person does, but you also have an obligation to carefully balance the volume objectives of the business at the same time, because you're being asked to keep the plant full. And if you make a critical pricing mistake in the recession, you may actually trigger a crippling volume decline that would unleash all of those bad leverage dynamics. So what's your secret weapon in this struggle? It's going to be price elasticity. Why? Because price elasticity is what allows you to measure the price volume trade-off and know what's going to happen to unit quantity when you change a price. So let me ground this in a very real example that you face all the time. It's the cost increase example. You know, once a year, your plant comes to you and says, my costs are going to go up and this is the new estimate. Well, you know what? That peanut butter price increase, peanut butter spread that you might have been doing in the past, is not going to cut it anymore, because when you think about it, even though in the past you just took the price up maybe uniformly, maybe on an average, you might have put it across many products because you had an average price increase from the cost or from the plant of 3%. You know, it sort of worked. I mean, it will to a certain degree. It's not optimal, but it doesn't blow up in your face. But in a recessionary environment, it can backfire big time. And you know exactly why. Not every buyer is equally willing to give you that 3% price increase that you might need to recover those costs in whole. So you are going to need to recover your costs asymmetrically. You've got to figure out where you can take a 4% increase in one situation, but be willing to live with a 2% or even a 0% somewhere else because you're getting resistance. How about this idea? You might even need to take an increase on product A, which doesn't have its cost going up, in order to recover the cost increase on product B, where the market won't allow you to do anything on price. They're absolutely clamping down. How are you going to do that? How do you know? How do you do it effectively, accurately, and at scale? It's back to sensitivity. So I think this concept is well grounded, but let's talk about this for just a second. The price optimization technology is available to you today to understand for every one of your pricing segments, what is the B2B price elasticity. You can get an accurate and pragmatic number that you can put into your pricing practice. But let's illustrate this idea to see what we mean and how this is possible. Look at these 3 histograms of price that I have here. Assume this is a price segment, a product, a customer type, a geography. I've got 3 different ones. My question for you is, can you tell which distribution is exhibiting signs of relatively high price sensitivity and which is medium, which low? Well, in a thumbnail sketch kind of way, this distribution on the top, this is the one that says, hey, the segment is a little bit more price sensitive. How do we see that? Sort of a couple of signs. One is more of my sales are happening at the low end of price, low end of the price range. That's suggesting there aren't very many buyers in the market who are willing to give me higher prices. That's kind of one indicator. And another one has to do with sort of rates of change over time. When I get beyond, say, the middle of the price range there, my volume drops rapidly. So I need to be careful, because when that price moves up, the volume response is large. So that's kind of it. This is not how the algorithms work, by the way, but these are just conceptual indications. Is it happening, and do we know? Yes. How about this one? By symmetry, or by reflective symmetry, you kind of see that's the less price sensitive. How do we know? Look at that. I get a lot of business at the high end of the price range. And when I drop price, it doesn't cause a bunch more volume to pop up at the low end. So, I'm not going to trigger a lot of volume by changing price here. That's what it might mean. And in the middle, then, it is medium. So look, if you know price elasticity, why do we care? If you know this, you know everything. You can mathematically construct these sorts of graphs or charts that say, as I were to take price up or down from 0 to any reasonable value, what would my quantities be? And if I know quantity, I know profit and I know revenue. And so you know what? You're going to be able to see right away, hey, there's a different price that maximizes my profit dollars from the unit price that maximizes my quantity and revenue. And businesses have intentions of where they want to fall in this range. And back to keeping the plants full, if you are being asked to ensure that the price changes you are putting in will not drive quantities below a certain value, this is how you can do it. You want to be able to maximize that combination of profit and quantity. You want to hit your business goals. You want to meet the quantity requirements while pulling in the most profit dollars possible, and elasticity gets you there. So let's look very quickly at 4 sort of typical patterns of cost pass-through. And these are all from actual B2B data sets that we've looked at. In figure 1 on the left, what's happening here is cost on the bottom is declining and price is dropping with it. And so, the company, I could say that this company was passing along their cost savings to the market. Whether that was intentional or optimal, we don't know, but that's what they did. On the right-hand side, example 2, here we see a different segment, and the cost was decreasing here also, but prices remain fixed. So for a period of time anyway, this company was keeping the cost savings in their pocket, and their margins went up in this segment. Now, it's an open question whether that strategy could be used next year if a recession hits, right? How about number 3? This one's kind of interesting. The cost was decreasing and the price actually went up. Now that's bordering on pure magic for most of you, right? Because the margins are getting big in a hurry. But, maybe that's achievable. If this cost savings came from internal plant efficiency, you might have been able to do this. If this was a cost dropping in the market and all suppliers had this situation, maybe you couldn't. So, it depends. Finally, figure 4 on the right. Now, this is the one that usually causes us to wince. The costs are going up just a little bit in this case, but prices are declining. So this segment is really experiencing a margin squeeze. It turns out that this is not what this company wanted to do or needed to do, but it was happening because of oversights and in their business and not having the tools in place. So now here's the pop quiz. Which of these 4 patterns is the one you should be striving for, the one to replicate in the recessionary environment? You're too clever. That's right. The $1 million answer is it depends, right? It depends heavily on the cost change you're talking about, the elasticity within each segment, the minimum quantities you're trying to hit, and so much more. You're right. And that's why you need the tools that will let you make very surgical cost changes, because that's the bottom line. Don't go peanut butter. Broad averages won't work. They might even make things worse. I would say they likely will. So you've got to get surgical. When, where, and how. And you're going to need technology to do it. One more idea, and then we're going to wrap up here and take your questions. Now, this is a bit outside of the traditional pricing purview, but go with me for a moment. It's well known in B2B that your best prospect is a current customer. And I know you're the pricing folks, and you think about price, but listen, it's very likely that you are the ones with the best and cleanest data sets, the best analytical tools, and the best analytical skills in the entire business. Am I right? That's your DNA. And I want you to think about applying that DNA to two other very important questions that affect business financial performance. How about this? What if we could look at what a customer is currently buying, compare to what they were buying in the past, and detect where some customer defection is beginning to happen early on, when the sales is slipping a little bit, but they haven't walked out the door yet? What if you could detect that and send a message to the account rep and say, you need to get in there and recover that profitable revenue that we already enjoy? Remember, you worked hard to get that 2 years ago, and price it right. Keeping the good business you have is the definition of success in the downtimes. You could do this with your data, your tools, and your skills if you put your mind to it. How about this? If you could come up with some ideal profile of what this customer should be buying. It could be product affinities. It could be marketing segment profiles, all sorts of ways to go about this. If you could identify what they should be buying, you might identify some areas where you can go sell more product to your existing customer. So if I'm not able to get much by lifting price on the sales I already have, why don't I go get some more sales from this customer at a decent price? Any dollars you add to the top line are going to also drop profit to the bottom line. And isn't that the ultimate goal? And of course, when you see a price opportunity, you're going to mention that, no doubt about it. All right, then here's my wrap up. And here are the takeaways, my friends. It's the time to prepare, or for many of you, repair your pricing processes and your systems. Don't panic about the coming recession. Go get equipped with the technology you need. 10x ROI is routine on these systems, so there's going to be support if you position it right, and you will have a breakthrough in your performance that's going to help in the downtimes. Look to the industries that regularly operate in a falling price environment and learn from them. Be like the Eskimo. The ideas that I've shared here are just a few, and there are more to find. Explore and repair margin leakage where it lives. We showed how correcting the matrix structure and the customer assignments can make a difference. And that's not quite the same as pushing new price levels into the market, now is it? Use elasticity to know precisely where and how much to move prices. We showed a cost pass-through example as a way of applying this, how you can handle that situation much differently and much more effectively with a better approach. And finally, consider complementary growth and recovery actions. Use your data sets to help the business remain profitable beyond just adjusting your price levels. And there are commercial tools available to help you here too, if you don't think you could roll your own or you don't have sufficient technology in-house. All right, so we've come to the end of the formal presentation, but I hope it's not the end of our conversation. If you would like to ask questions, if you'd like to reach out and chat about these ideas, talk about your business situation in particular, I'm very happy to do that. You can see my email contact information here. And by the way, I mentioned in an earlier slide about a B2B benchmark pricing report. I'd like to make a free copy of that available to you. It's at this URL that you see here on the slide. It's rich information. It's something that you can share with stakeholders outside of the pricing team to help them see your world better, and it may have some eye-opening stats for you as well. So thank you for joining me today. I've really enjoyed this.